It is good to be here, and I'm excited that you all are here. Tonight is our third week in the series, Join Me, and we're really excited for that. If I haven't gotten a chance to meet you yet, my name is Jared, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself. But first, I have a few questions to ask of you guys, okay? So raise your hand if any of you have an iPhone. Does anyone have an iPhone? Yep, my hand is up too because I have an iPhone, so we've got lots of hands up. Does anybody have an iPad, or maybe someone in your family has an iPad? Yeah. All right, I've got one more for you, and this is from a few years ago, but does anybody have an iPod, or do you remember what an iPod was? Yeah, I had one of those too. They were awesome, yeah. So anyone who spends a lot of time with me or paid attention to those questions realized that my hand was up for all of those, and I really like Apple products. I've just noticed in my life that if I need a product, I usually go for the Apple version. And I want to tell you about the day that my parents let me get my first iPhone. Does anybody remember the day you guys got your first smartphone? It was a big deal, right? So I had one of those old phones that was like normal on the front, and then you could turn it sideways and a keyboard came out, right? Yeah, so that was the phone I had, and I had dropped it a bunch of times and just didn't really care about it, and so it was getting pretty bad. And one day over the summer, my parents came to me and said, "Jared, your phone is pretty bad. It's time that you probably get a new one." And then they said, if you want to get a smartphone, you can get one. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I can't believe my parents are letting me do this. And like I said, this was the summer, so it was like June or July. But anybody who follows Apple products knows that September is when the iPhones come out. So I was already thinking ahead, I could get this new phone right now, or I could wait a couple months and get the new iPhone. So I asked my parents if I could do that, and they said, sure, that's totally fine, go ahead. And so I started waiting. And as I was waiting, I'm watching YouTube videos about this. I'm studying online all these different articles about what might be on the iPhone. I keep waiting, and I get more excited. And as I get more excited, I actually start to daydream what my life is going to be like once I get this. So suddenly, I can be on Instagram now while I'm at school, or I can be on a run and get better data, or I can even FaceTime my friends and family or watch Netflix wherever I'm at. See, I realize my life will never be the same once I get this new iPhone. And so finally, the day comes where they unveil the iPhone, and I cannot wait. It looks awesome. This is the iPhone with the fingerprint scanner, and so it was a big deal. Everything was changing. And so finally, I get this iPhone, and I'm so excited. I've waited in line, and I've waited for months, and I get it. And I get home, and I'm using it, and I'm texting, and I'm calling my friends, and I just love it. And I go to bed that night, and I wake up the next morning, and I still go back to using it, and I'm in love with it. I'm watching more videos. It's amazing. And then lunchtime comes around, and I realized that my life wasn't actually that different. You see, I thought the iPhone I had would make people like me more. I thought that the feelings I had of being empty or of being alone would go away, or that suddenly I would be cool now. But I wasn't. Who I was as a person was the same. The feelings I had of emptiness, they were still there. And I realized that things can get in the way. See, I had spent so much time looking forward to this iPhone, I forgot who was around me. My iPhone and my pursuit of this had gotten in the way of my relationships with my family. It had gotten in the way of my relationships with my friends. And honestly, it had gotten in the way of my relationships with God. And tonight, that's what I want to talk about, our relationships with stuff. Everybody has stuff, right? And stuff isn't bad. We have stuff that keeps us fed. We have stuff that keeps us warm. And we even have stuff right now that makes sure that we don't smell bad. Yeah. And I want to be clear. The stuff we have isn't bad. And this isn't a sermon where I say we need to get rid of all of our stuff or we need to give everything we have away. Instead, I want us to think about what our stuff means to us. See, we're in week 3 of our series, Join Me, and we have been learning about all of these different spiritual disciplines or practices that Jesus actually invites us into so that we can learn and grow more like him. And I want us to remember that these aren't rules that we have to follow for God to like us. Instead, they're invitations to grow. And as we've mentioned the last couple weeks, then spiritual disciplines are a gift. They're something that God has given to us to love him more. And there's a set of disciplines that we're going to talk about tonight that are called external disciplines. And external might be kind of a weird word or something that seems kind of heady, but really it's just something that means outside of ourselves. So Ryan talked a couple weeks ago about study and prayer, right? And that would be an internal discipline, something that we do so that our heart and mind can really grow to love Jesus. But external disciplines are focused on the things around us. External disciplines remind us that the things around us can help or hurt our relationship with God. So one of the things that I've been really thinking about to help me understand external disciplines then is imagine that you're on a basketball team. We have basketball season coming up, right? Is anybody playing basketball? Yeah. So what would happen if you had basketball practice on an ice skating rink every day? Do you think that would work out? Yeah, it might be kind of fun for a while, but imagine you get to the basketball game and the other team's been practicing on a court the whole time. You guys would probably lose and not do very well, right? So an external discipline, I think, is kind of like that. If you practice on a basketball court, you can play your basketball game to the best of your ability. See, the things around us actually help us perform or actually help us grow, right? And so today, the discipline that we're going to talk about is one called simplicity. Has anybody ever heard of simplicity before? Yeah, a couple people. Has anybody then ever heard of something like minimalism? Is that, yeah, or maybe even like Marie Kondo, or you've watched her show on Netflix? Yeah. So all of these things are kind of from culture, right? And they use ideas of simplicity to help us better understand. So as we talk about simplicity tonight, think of some of those things that we know that maybe remind us of simplicity, okay? And I've shared then that there's, our culture talks about simplicity a little bit. We have people that are telling us that we need to own less or be more intentional, right? But does the Bible say anything about simplicity? Actually, it does. It says quite a bit. And one of the things that we learn through the Bible is that God doesn't just care about who we are, but God actually cares about the stuff that we have. We see in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 20, Jesus is teaching, and he's going to teach us about our possessions. He says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." So I have another question for you guys, and I want you to turn to your neighbor and answer this. Christmas is coming up, right? And I want you to share one thing that you're looking to get this year for Christmas. All right, after you've answered, let's bring it back in now. Okay, so whether it's the new PlayStation or it's something from Amazon or even just a new pair of shoes, there's things that we all want this year, right? And I know, I feel the same way. I love getting new stuff. But have you noticed, though, that that new stuff we get is really cool for a moment or a few days or even a week? But then that newness kind of wears off. And just like that iPhone story I shared, the new thing we get is amazing, right? But then it just goes away. The feelings we have of being alone or of being empty, they come back, right? And we feel like we have to get more stuff or new stuff or better stuff to fill us. But what if Jesus offered a new way? See, Jesus says our stuff on earth will rot. It won't last. The things that we have on earth, they're important, but they won't be important elsewhere. That new jacket I've been looking for so long, those new shoes that you maybe been looking at, they might make us feel good for a minute, but it doesn't last. But Jesus also tells us there are treasures that do last. That fulfillment, that filling, what we're looking for is actually in Jesus. He doesn't care what we look like. He doesn't care the kind of clothes that we have. He doesn't even care if we have the new iPhone or the one with the keyboard. See, Jesus wants us, not our stuff. And honestly, I've noticed that my stuff can get in the way of me loving Jesus. When I feel lonely, I go and buy something. And when I do that, I add more to my life, more stuff to get in the way of my relationship with Jesus. But Jesus actually invites us to give thought to the things that we have. And when we talk about simplicity, I think it's important for us to understand that simplicity for me doesn't look the same as simplicity for someone else. The spiritual practices are going to look different for each person. They might function a little differently, but it helps us to ask the question, do I need these things, or why is it that I'm wanting these things? We see simplicity says that Jesus is our first priority, even over all the stuff we have. And when we live in simplicity, we actually give Jesus space in our hearts and in our lives. So there's another story from the Bible that I want us to look at. And there was a man who was called the rich young ruler, and he wanted to follow Jesus, but he had some stuff get in the way. And let's see what happens in this story and see if we can learn something about simplicity in our own lives. As he was setting out on a journey, a man ran up to him and knelt before him and asked, "Good teacher, what shall I do so that I may inherit eternal life?" But Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony. Do not defraud. Honor your father and mother." And he said to him, "Teacher, I have kept all these things from my youth." Looking at him, Jesus showed love to him and said to him, "One thing you lack. Go and sell all you possess and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me." But he was deeply dismayed by these words, and he went away grieving, for he was one who owned much property. We see this is a man who had everything. He had all the stuff he could have ever wanted, and he loved his stuff more than he loved wanting to follow God. Jesus didn't say owning the stuff was wrong. He didn't say owning the stuff was bad. But Jesus was actually calling this man to more, and the ruler loved his stuff too much to say yes. And I think this gives us a picture of simplicity in our own lives, right? It's really easy to think about not wanting our stuff to have authority over us, but it's really hard for that to be lived out. Just like the rich young ruler, a lot of times we have our stuff and it has control. You see, everything we come across, it tells us that we want more. It tells us that we need more to be fulfilled. But Jesus wants us just as we are. And Jesus doesn't look at the treasures we have on earth. We see that Jesus invites us to draw closer to him. And when we do that, we find that the fulfillment we're searching for is in him. Simplicity doesn't say, though, that we can't ever shop or we can't ever buy something new, that we have to just always get used or give up stuff. No, simplicity says that Jesus has my heart, and if he has my heart, he has authority over my things. And we see that when Jesus has authority over our heart and authority over our things, then the stuff that we have in our life, it isn't actually our stuff at all. It's God's stuff that he's letting us use. You see, you know you're living simply then when Jesus comes before your stuff. And so as we close out then and we go into small group, I want us to be willing to talk about that, willing to talk about simplicity. Is this something that's easy or is it something that's hard? Does simplicity scare you? Does the idea of giving Jesus authority over our stuff freak you out? Or does it excite you and make you want to come alive? And then along with that, I want us to talk about steps that we could take towards becoming more simple. See, simplicity is going to look different for every person, and simplicity is going to be a journey. So what are some of those initial steps that we can start to begin the practice of simplicity? Would you guys close with me in prayer? God, thank you so much for today and for the chance that we could all be together in Ransom Teens. May you remind us that you have authority over our lives and the things that we have, and would we be willing to be courageous and bold and allow you to tell us what to do with the stuff you've given us. In your name I pray, amen. I'll head out to small groups now. They should be on the screen.